Welcome to the latest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast. Lance Medow with you as we are continuing to break down the 2022 draft class. In the second round, the Giants added another weapon to the offensive side of the ball as they took Kentucky wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson with the 43rd overall pick. And to get more into Robinson and what he'll bring to the Giants, we're now joined by a man who coached him for his lone season with the Wildcats as his positional coach. That is none other than Kentucky wide receivers coach Scott Woodward. Coach, greatly appreciate the time today. This is certainly a player that you know very well. And I want to start with the fact that he spent his first two seasons at Nebraska. So you joined the staff prior to the 2021 season, just as he joined the roster. What were your first impressions of Wan'Dale Robinson, considering he was not a member of Kentucky prior to that?
Yeah, no, when I got on staff here, the guys were saying, hey, we got a pretty good shot at landing this transfer. Wan'Dale, he's from Kentucky, and I threw on the Nebraska tape, and the thing that pops off right as you watch it is this man is special with the ball in his hands. He would line up in the slot at running back all over the field, and when Nebraska got the ball in his hands, special things happens. And coming from Nebraska and bring him into our system with Liam Cohen, who's now the OC for the Los Angeles Rams, all you could kind of look at it and see is the Cooper Kupp comparison, and what the Rams would do with Cooper Kupp. That's kind of what we sold them on. And he came in here and obviously produced at a very high level, had 104 catches for over 1,300 yards, was tops in the nation in both those categories. And, with him being such a guy that just loves football and can take it mentally and throw and put it back on the field into what a great product he did. It was so easy just to get on the rock because we, lined him up all over the place. But his mental aspect of the game is such like, not as good as Cooper Kupp, but just, very close to it. And we threw a lot at him and he was able to handle all of it.
You mentioned Liam Cohen, who now is the Rams offensive coordinator. He was the Kentucky OC, so that our viewers can understand that he was actually previously on the Rams staff. So why was Cooper Kupp, Coach, a great model for what you thought you could get out of Wan'Dale Robinson?
It just the way the Rams used him in his offense and how he lines up. And, when Liam came here, he would talk about how Cooper just how smart he was and how they could throw all this stuff at him and he could handle it all and understand defenses and understand concepts and the coverage and what's going on, not just pre-snap, but post-snap. And when you sit down and talk to Wan'Dale, since he's been drafted or before he's been drafted, all these scouts and coaches have always asked me, like, what makes Wan'Dale so great? And one thing, the kid's an absolute dog. That's just on the field. But the one thing that really makes him special is anything that I have ever said to that kid, he's remembered. So there was no ever an issue of taking anything I've told him or coached on him in the meeting room to the field. It was secondhand. It was, you can tell him some little detail about a route or a play and it's done on the field, and that's a very special trait to have as a wide receiver, and especially being in a pro style system, that I'm assuming, the Giants and a bunch of other teams will be running, helped him a bunch and helped him tremendously. So his mental, he'll already be ready to go, hear the play in the huddle, come out, break the huddle, line up in the slot or wherever it may be, and play fast and at a high level.
I'm glad you brought up the type of system that you ran at Kentucky and how that may translate to the NFL, because if you look at Brian Daboll, the Giants head coach, and Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, they come from the Bills and the Chiefs respectively, Coach. And it seems as if, at least my takeaway is, they had similar personnel to Wan'Dale Robinson. What I mean is a Tyreek Hill, a McCole Hardman, Isaiah McKenzie, and a Cole Beasley, and how Robinson, I think, could fit in that profile once you get him out in open space to do a lot of damage. I'm curious, how much do you think that makes sense and that could be a great fit for what the Giants want to run?
No, I think it is a great fit. You talk about those receivers you just mentioned, and you could tell by the Giants drafting Wan'Dale in the second round, they had a clear vision of what they wanted him to be. So and that was one of the things after the draft that I talked to Wan'Dale about, and when he talked to Coach Daboll, like, they just had a clear vision of what he wanted him to do for him. And Those receivers you mentioned, some may think they're, gadgety receivers, Tyreek Hill, but make no mistake about it, all those guys are great wide receivers and they can run the entire route tree just like Wan'Dale can. Some guys would, as he came here, they thought maybe because he was coming from Nebraska and Nebraska used him all these different ways, kind of as like a gadget guy. He was our number one receiver. He lined up and he ran the big boy routes and he was, running those 20-yard outs, those 20-yard ins and 20-yard, all those play action passes that the Rams do so well. And, the 49ers and all these teams do well in the NFL, that he was our guy that we were throwing that ball to. So he can run the route tree. Yes, can he do all those gadgety things? Absolutely, because he's just so dynamic. But I think, he's going to fit perfectly into that offense because, being drafted so high in the second round, it just shows you, the clear vision and the plan that the Giants have to use him.
You referred to the versatility that he showcased at Nebraska. I think the numbers that jump off the page, Coach, is 134 runs he had in 2 seasons with the Cornhuskers. You only ran him 7 times, according to the statistics. I'm just curious why you focused more on, hey, like you said, let's showcase him as our number one wide receiver as opposed to trying to maybe utilize him more out of the backfield.
No, yeah, that was actually one of our selling points. He was, if you ask Wan'Dale, and this is a kind of a funny story. I don't know if he wants me to tell you this, but if you ask Wan'Dale, why he transferred from Kentucky, he will tell you the exact play when he's like, I got to get out of here. And it was, I'm not sure who they were playing. It might've been Wisconsin, but he was lined up in the backfield as a running back, and Wisconsin brought a cross dog blitz, and he had to protect it and pick up that blitzer. And it was about Wan'Dale barely touches 5'8". And you're talking about a Big Ten linebacker going full force at you. He's like, I've had enough of this. So one of the things that we had when we brought him here, the selling points was like, no, we're going to use you as a wide receiver. We're going to showcase your talent at wideout. He had enough of lining up in the backfield and taking on those big boys in the middle. So that's kind of one of the reasons why.
Completely understandable. However, as you can attest to, Coach, when you do play wide receiver in the NFL, you're going to have to block for maybe running backs or other wide receivers. So despite the fact that people who look at his physique, they look at his stature, they say, well, how is a guy like that going to last in the NFL? Why is it that his height does not tell his whole story?
Just his mentality, man. He's an absolute dog. Like, there was a play this past season where he catches the ball on the 3-yard line, and the only way in the end zone was through a guy, and he ran him over for 6 points. And he's had many, explosive blocks in the run game as a wide receiver to bounce our guys, our running backs out to the outside. He's just very smart with it. Is he going to be the most physical guy in there? Absolutely not. But he's going to be smarter than the person that he's blocking, and he's going to know how to use his body and his leverage to the best of his ability, and he'll get the job done. No doubt about that.
You brought up the term gadget player and how we have a tendency to look at somebody the size of Wan'Dale Robinson like that, but he proved at Kentucky he's so much more. Interestingly, Coach, they have a player by the name of Kadarius Toney. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure your familiarity with him, but he played at Florida, and there's been some similarities between the two. The reason I bring that up is Robinson has been talked about as primarily being a slot wide receiver. But based on what you're saying, hey, don't just categorize him as a guy that could play in the slot. So if the Giants do have Toney, Robinson, Saquon Barkley all on the field at the same time, how much potential do you see him if they have to line him up on the outside?
I mean, to me, it doesn't matter where you put him. He's going to make plays regardless. I'll tell you one thing, I wouldn't want to be that defensive coordinator that has to game plan against those 3 guys. That's a pretty scary threesome right there. Because Saquon and Toney are great players in their own right. But, Wan'Dale, at the next level in the NFL, I can see him being a great slot. But just like I said, man, he can line up anywhere you need him to be, and he'll be successful.
The other thing that I think a lot of people talk about with what he could bring to the Giants, and most rookies need to have a willingness to do this, is contribute on special teams. Now, he was utilized as a punt returner for a little bit at Kentucky. He actually had some kickoff return work at Nebraska. What did you see out of him as a punt returner, and what perhaps could translate over to the NFL level?
Yeah, just the trust factor, when you knew he was back there, you trusted that he was going to catch the ball. And I know as a coach and any coach, they'll tell you the most important part about being a punt returner is being able to trust the guy back there to catch it, so, and then his just ability to catch the ball and make the first man miss. I mean, you can throw the tape on whether it's a punt return or a catch or reception or anything. He did a great job of making that first man miss. And I truly believe, one-on-one, there wasn't anyone in the country last year that could tackle him one-on-one if he had some open space. His ability just to put his leg in the ground and make you miss. It was truly special to see. I mean, the amount of broken tackles or missed tackles that he caused. I don't know if PFF does a stat on that, but I'm assuming it would be top of the country.
Well, they may want to add that category to your point, Coach, if they don't have it yet.
They may.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think when we were talking earlier about his ability to do damage, if you could get him out in open space, what I'm curious about is you look at his numbers. You mentioned he set all types of Kentucky single season records, and you would think, well, a few games into the season, right, a defense would have a better read on him. But it seemed as if you consistently got production out of him. So how did you walk that fine line of anticipating, well, maybe the defense is going to play him this way differently because of all the highlights that he had earlier in the year?
In my coaching career, I've kind of learned that, sometimes we have offensive coaches give defensive guys too much credit, so yes, we were prepared for, every week for maybe a defense to, spotlight him and try to take him out of the picture. But most of the time, those defenses just played what they played, and we found ways to attack what they did. Very rarely, guys change or defenses change the way they try to attack because, I think they just thought that, it was, I don't know. I guess they didn't give him the respect he deserved, and when teams would put their best on him, that they could think they could shut him down, his route running ability, just go back to that. And his fundamentals just, overtook it. And obviously we have a pretty good quarterback here in Will Levis. That'll be a high draft pick next year. Was able to give him the ball and give him the ball a lot.
Speaking of respect from the defensive side of things, interestingly, you went up against LSU this past season, and they have a corner by the name of Cordell Flott, who the Giants took in the third round. And Coach, when both of the players were drafted, they talked about the mutual respect that they had for one another, specifically coming out of that matchup. As a wide receivers coach, I'm assuming you do a lot of prep work on the defensive backs to prepare your wide receiver. I'm just curious what you thought of Flott in preparing for him and what you may recall from that matchup between he and Robinson.
Yeah, and I'm not sure after watching the game how much they actually lined up on each other, because I know we do a great job of moving Wan'Dale all around. So it's tough for a DB to follow him around. But, being LSU, all they do is run man coverage. So, that kid was pretty good. I know we definitely watched him every Thursday. Our meetings on Thursdays, we highlight those DBs. I'll give them about anywhere from 10 to 15 clips of how they play on press or off coverage. But that kid was special. He was definitely a guy that we kept our eye out for and had to know where he was on the field at all times.
On a related note to the defensive side of the ball, Wan'Dale Robinson is not the only Kentucky player in a Giants uniform right now, because the Giants signed undrafted rookie free agent safety Yusuf Corker, who you obviously were exposed to last season, team captain, led the team in passes defense. What was your big takeaway from watching him go to work in practice and also in games on the opposite side of the field? Yeah,
Yusuf is one heck of a great young man, always about his business. I mean, if you've seen him in person, he's absolutely rocked up. I wish I had his body. He's a great kid. He comes into work every day, doesn't say much. Truly a great leader on the team. I think he had the voice of the defense, and all those guys on defense looked up to him. I know our defensive staff is truly going to miss him. But you could definitely out in the field feel him every single game. Being how physical he is in the run game, he'll come downhill and hit you. And then obviously, like you mentioned, passes defended. He's great in the cover. I think he was underrated in that aspect, And so I think you guys getting him as an free agent, you guys got a steal there. because he's going to, I truly think he's going to be one of those guys that are, 10, 12 years in the league.
Interesting to hear your perspective. The other thing that I think is worth noting, over 500 snaps on special teams during his career. So it seems he contributed there. And then it seems as if when Kentucky wanted a blitz, they more often than not turned to him. And the reason I bring that up, Coach, is Giants defensive coordinator Wink Martindale, he absolutely loves to blitz. So how do you see him maybe fitting into that facet of the defense?
Yeah, and again, our defensive coordinator here, Brad White, does a great job. He was, I think, 6 years in the league with the Indianapolis Colts as a linebacker coach. So our system here that we use is, again, kind of like offense. It's very pro style driven. And we put a lot on our safeties, able to make checks and all that, and be able to set the defense right. And I think his, I've never been in a meeting with Yusuf, but those guys down the hall, they talk about how good he was mentally, just like Wan'Dale is. And I think that will help him in the long run, because as you go, especially those free agent type guys, the smarter you are, the longer you're going to be there. So being in special teams and being able to be so smart and run the defense at a high level here in the SEC, I think that's only going to benefit him tremendously.
On the topic of undrafted players, it's only appropriate we segue to another connection that you have to the New York Football Giants, and that is Victor Cruz. Because for our viewers, correct, that don't know your history, just real quickly, you were at UMass with Victor Cruz in terms of your playing days, as was Liam Cohen. Yeah. So it's quite the small world in terms of football.
Yeah, so I'm actually a little mad at Vic right now.
Really?
Me, him, and Liam had a group chat. It was last week. Because if you didn't see it, Vic's only been playing golf for a year and a half now, and he just had a hole-in-one. I don't know if you saw it, it was all over social media, and Liam has 2, and I don't have any, and I play golf more than the 2 of them combined. So, I was a little salty about how Vic got a hole-in-one. Had to be a lucky shot, obviously, but no, Vic's great, man. We stay in contact every now and again. If something like that happens, we all group chat together. But it's he's one of a kind. He's a great friend.
Coach, I didn't mean to bring up such a sore subject. I didn't realize that. I should have studied up on the golf history between the three of you.
No, I'm actually I'm trying to get with him end of this month. I'm headed out to Westchester County. I got a little golf trip with some buddies. We're going out there kind of by you, playing Wingfoot, playing Quaker Ridge, playing Hudson National. So it'd be good to get out there. Maybe I'll invite him around and try to take some of the money.
Nice. Well, as a follow-up to that, and good luck in terms of taking a few pieces of green from him, Victor Cruz was known for, to your point, like Corker, somebody who was undrafted, fought his way, grinded it out, emerged into a star. But he was also a very shifty guy, like a Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm just curious, having been around both of them during their playing days, do you see any similarities between
I do. And one thing I think Victor didn't get a lot of credit for is how smart he was as well. Because when we were in college, we were a pro style offense as well. So we moved him all around and he was able to run the route tree. And I do see some similarities, how they move in the slot and how smooth he is. Being able to, on those choice routes and option routes, how to make the decisions to make the defender never right. And then the ability with the run after catch, I think, is very similar. When Vic caught the ball for the Giants, you never knew what he was going to do with it. Same with Wan'Dale. They have a very similar, like the dead leg, the one leg stiff leg right there. I think that was very similar, just to be able to make the guy miss. And I hope Wan'Dale is just as successful as Vic as he comes to be a Giant.
Always good to keep defenses guessing, as you can attest to. Now, before we wrap up, it's only appropriate. Clearly, Robinson made quite the impact for you personally in Kentucky, because over your left shoulder, you are showcasing the likes of future Giants wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson.
No doubt. That's one of his I got to get another one up here behind me too, but I had to make that. That was a single season record, 104 catches last year. That was the most ever in Kentucky history. So I got to get the other one for 1,304 yards for the most yards in Kentucky history in a single season. So not done yet. I still got to add a little bit more to the wall here.
It's a work in progress, but we do appreciate, Coach, that you thought through the background for our Giants Huddle podcast.
I had to. I was over here. It was all bright. The windows were going. So I got my guy, Steve Young, over here to over my right shoulder, my man, Wan'Dale Robinson, over here to my left.
That's a nice mix. Every wide receiver needs a great quarterback.
No doubt.
Certainly the Giants are hoping the connection between Wan'Dale Robinson and Daniel Jones flourishes in Big Blue.
I hope
He is Scott Woodward, Kentucky wide receiver coach who coached Wan'Dale Robinson at the Wildcats in 2021. Second-round pick for the Giants. Coach, greatly appreciate the time and the insight, and best of luck moving forward.
I appreciate you, man. Take care.
This is the latest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, which you can catch on Giants.com, the mobile app, and your favorite podcast platform.